Just as a test, anyone wearing headphones, can you hear me okay? All right. So we're doing silent disco this year. We don't have the big speakers out here. I think that they said that I got a little bit too loud and I was annoying everyone around everyone in the area. So you do have volume controls on your headset, one of the ear cups. If you have not used these at the event yet, just letting you know. You might need to turn it down when I get a little bit too excited talking about automation. Totally understandable. And before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and respect their elders past and present. My name is Palmer Sample. I'm a developer advocate here with Cisco Learning and Certifications. Where we are, Cisco Learning and Certifications. My team is focused on creating content and delivering training for what we call Cisco Training Boot Camps. It's about a 6 weeks, experience. We focus a lot on automation, whether it's NSO, enterprise networking, ACI, Meraki. And if you have any interest in going through that path or learning more about it, just see me after this event or after this session. What we are all here for right now, hopefully, is Ansible or break time or having lunch, but hopefully mostly Ansible. And the reason that this session was created is last year I was at this event and I talked a little bit about, I think it might have been pre-commit hooks, something like that. And someone came up, it may have been you, after the session and said, hey, I hear a lot about Ansible and it's on the exam. It's on the CCNA. It's on the Enterprise Networking Core exam. But what does it do? What is it? How do you get started with Ansible? So I took that and created this session for Amsterdam this year, and wanted to make sure that I had a chance to go through this. So really this is about Ansible for Cisco certification candidates. So we're going to be covering what is Ansible, what does it do, some basics about using Ansible. Oh, look, Ansible for Cisco certification candidates. I have a clicker in my hand. I have to remember to use it. Now, after this session, if you have not used it already, in the Cisco Events app on your phone, there's a link in there. It says join the conversation. That will put you into a WebEx space for this session. So after the session, if you have questions or even after the event, if you start thinking, I wonder if we can do this, just reach out in that space and we can continue the conversation. Today, what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about what Ansible is. We're going to talk about key terms. And the key terms are the terms that you should know going into your certification exam for Ansible. The basic requirements that you need to run Ansible. And then everyone's favorite part, if you've seen me speak, that you know that my demos are very binary. They either work great or else they crash and burn. Unfortunately, it crashed and burned before I even started because I forgot I got a laptop upgrade just recently and it's running Apple Silicon, so I can't run my virtual router on there. I need an x86 machine to run my Cat 8K on the local device. So there we go. Demo is already thumbs down, no problem. So let's talk about what Ansible is. Ansible is an automation product. It's designed for configuration management. Configuration management. I don't mean spinning up large infrastructures in the cloud. I don't mean testing our networks, but I do mean creating a list of tasks to perform on a device and apply that configuration consistently. Okay, configuration management. It is open source. It's based in Python, but as you will see, you do not need to know anything about Python to use Ansible or to configure Ansible. And it was designed for server configuration management, Linux, Unix, Windows, anything else. But of course, we are all here because it has become very, very popular for networks. And we're going to get into how we can use network or how we can configure networks using Ansible. let's talk about things you need to know. And, I wish that I would have known these things before I started with Ansible, because when I came to Cisco. Before that, I was on the customer side, I was a senior architect. And back when I got into automation using Ansible, probably around 2015, I did my best to figure it out. So let's talk about what I wish that I would have known. Number one, Ansible is agentless. I don't know why I'm getting louder, like I have to talk to you in the back. So sorry if I'm getting louder and louder as we go. Ansible is agentless. What is an agent? Well, a lot of you, especially if you have corporate managed laptops, or if you're managing servers or other infrastructure, you might have backup software installed, something like that. Well, that would be an agent. Our backup software needs to communicate with this agent, and that's how we access our remote device. Ansible is agentless. It will actually connect to a remote device. It runs on what we call the control node. The control node is responsible for establishing the connections to our devices and for managing the configuration. Now, the things that we interact with are called managed nodes. These are very key terms: control node, managed nodes. Okay? Ansible uses a push model. And what I mean by this is, Ansible, I define what I want Ansible to do. Okay? I'm gonna create some list of things that I want Ansible to do. And Ansible is going to parse that, and it's going, again, control node manages the connection to the device. So it manages connecting to our remote network device. And then it's also responsible for actually sending the configuration commands to those devices. Okay? So, and yes, your connection types. When I say connections, of course, we can use SSH. When we use modules like for interacting with iOS XE or something like that, then we can use the CLI, or we can use RESTconf using a built-in Ansible module, URI. And we can interact with devices just using REST APIs, such as APIC, Meraki, or Catalyst Center. So we have multiple different ways of communicating with those managed nodes and pushing that configuration out. It does not have to use CLI, but you will find that's what Ansible does on the back end for a lot of these tasks. Okay? We're going to talk about two very important things here. The first thing is called JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. Has anyone ever heard of JSON or seen JSON? Yeah, most of us have. So we know this is a list, and the first element is a dictionary. We have the name, the host. So these things look kind of familiar, maybe, if you've ever even seen Ansible, but the important thing is this is JSON representation. Ansible uses something called YAML, which is one of those acronyms. YAML ain't markup language. And YAML, we can represent JSON using YAML. So this whole JSON data set here can be represented in YAML in this syntax. So we have a list here. The outer element is a list. With YAML, a list is created using a hyphen. So this is a list element. And then this is a dictionary: name, hosts, gather, facts. Those are all keys with values. And then tasks, that defines a list. By the way, we're going to talk a little bit about this. This is part of a playbook. We haven't got to playbooks yet, but here we have a list element with a dictionary, name. And then we have a key here, iOS host name, and the value is another dictionary. So this, I'm trying to make sure I don't fall off the stage like I usually do. This can be represented in text, and it's all about the indentation. Okay, YAML is indentation based, and it's a way to represent data using text. And it doesn't matter if you use 2 spaces, 4 spaces, 8 spaces, does not matter what your indentation is here, as long as it is consistent throughout your YAML file. I cannot do 2 spaces here, 10 spaces over here. Some Some products might parse that properly, some might not. So just make sure you're consistent with your indentation. Most modern development environments like Visual Studio Code or PyCharm, once you create a YAML file, it will automatically handle this indentation for you. Ansible, this is a key term. Very key. In fact, this is the whole concept behind how Ansible operates. And it's called idempotence. This is a mathematical term. It's got this some kind of fancy definition that, off the top of my head, I'm not really sure, but I can demonstrate how we experience this in real life. We're here in a pretty big city. In my hometown, I don't think we have a single elevator. It's pretty small. But we're here in the city, and we've got these big hotels and high rises with, 28 floors or 18 floors, and you have an elevator. And what happens is the elevator is at some floor, and I want to go up, so I'm going to press the up button. When I did that, I changed the state of the elevator. The elevator is now coming to me when I hit that button the first time. But, in case you cannot tell, I'm an American, and maybe sometimes we get a little bit impatient, and what do? We press the button again, or press it a couple of times, or someone else comes up after the button's been pressed, and they look at it and see it's lit up, but the elevator's not here, so they press the button again. That did nothing. That did not change the state of the elevator. Okay? So we don't know. I don't know. Why is the elevator not here? Well, it's slow, or it stopped at every floor on the way down like it usually does for me. Translate that to our tasks, our configuration tasks in Ansible. Idempotence. If I were to write a certification exam, I would probably have something about idempotence on that exam. And no, I have not seen the exam questions. I don't write exams. What that means, this is actually the definition. Given the same input, once the state is changed, repeating the same task again will not change that state. So just like that elevator button, here I've got a sample, some sample output. All we did here is configure the host name. And you can see here, it ran through this play, and okay, we wanted the host name to be Cisco Live Router 1.ciscolive.demo. You can see the output's a little bit different here. I ran this twice, and I took a screenshot, and you can see, play recap. The task was successful. Okay. It was successful both times. But the first time, it changed the host name. The second time I ran it, the host name was already set. So now we see changed is 0. So the playbook succeeded, but that's the concept of idempotence is what happens on the back end really is that we run this module to configure the host name. Ansible will reach out to the node. It will get the value of the host name. And if it does not match our desired state, what we want it to be, then it will change it. Second time it runs, it collects the host name of the device. Oh, wait, no, this matches what we want it to be. It does not change it. So that's idempotence. Next, Jinja 2 syntax. Has anyone ever seen Jinja 2 syntax or heard of it? A couple of people. Okay, good. Jinja 2 is a very powerful templating language written for Python. I said you don't have to know any Python for Ansible, and that's true. What we're really dealing with is text markups, okay? Here I've got some variables defined. This is that YAML format, right? This is our indentation. This is a NTP config as a dictionary. Servers is a key, and then we have 2 list elements, 2 different NTP servers. I don't want to type in those NTP servers each time I run a playbook or a task to configure NTP on a device. Because what happens if these servers change? Now I have to go back through and find all of the places that it's hard-coded and change them there. So I set my variable, and then inside of my task, that I'm going to run, I use this syntax. And there are only a couple of things you have to know here. Number one, it needs to be enclosed in double quotation marks. Number two, it has to be surrounded by double curly brackets, double curly braces. So opening curly braces, 2 of them. You do not have to have a space here, but it's recommended for readability. The name of a variable, and then we close that curly brace. So what I've done is NTP config is the variable name. This right here will get replaced with the content of NTP config. So now that's how we write our playbooks and how we use variables in Ansible. When we run this, the output that we will get, the variable that we wanted to replace was NTP config, or that we wanted to view was NTP config. The contents of that are servers with this list of servers. We print it, and it prints servers, 172.16.1.254 and 253. So it printed out the content of that variable. That special curly bracket got replaced when we executed it with that variable. That is how everything needs to run in Ansible. You're going to use these variables and use curly braces. Once you have that, you are pretty much ready to go. YAML and your Jinja 2 syntax. So let's get started. First, we have to define our inventory. An inventory is just a file that contains the devices that we want to interact with, how to interact with them, and how we can authenticate. That's what we need, even when you do it with your PuTTY session or CLI, right? I need to know where I'm connecting. I need to know my credentials. Ansible inventory is no different. It expects your hosts to be reachable via DNS. And when you put an inventory name here, it's going to try to connect to Cisco Live Router 1.ciscolive.example. Sometimes I might have a proxy, or sometimes I might not have DNS configured or something. In that case, I can tell Ansible, this is not resolvable. Set this variable Ansible host. That's a special variable. And we just give it the IP address of the device. So DNS is expected. You can override the behavior. Next, you can figure out what Ansible user and password are. That's our credentials for the device. And the next, we can define variables in our inventory. So that snippet you just saw with the NTP config, that applies to all hosts in the inventory. So when I run the NTP configuration tasks, then they will all have that same server. And notice the indentation. Once again, this is just YAML. If I had something that I wanted to perform for a specific group of devices, you just saw we had the NTP servers defined for every device in our network. In this case, I want to create a group called XE hosts. So maybe I have a mixed network. I have NXOS and iOS XR and iOS XE. Maybe I want to have a play that I can restrict only to the iOS XE hosts. I could create a group. And the way I do that is I start with this key here, children. Children of what? Children of all hosts. Okay, so our inventory, all of our hosts, that's everything. A group is just a child of all hosts. And we name the group XE hosts. And then here, notice the indentation, I tell it what hosts belong to this group. So I can define all of my connection parameters for all of my devices in the main inventory. And then once I have all that defined, I can group my devices and I can apply variables just to this group. So maybe this group, you can see we're using network CLI for the connection. Maybe we'd have a group for RESTconf or netconf. But in this case, we're going to use the network CLI, and we're going to tell it that the operating system here is Cisco iOS. Where do I get this? Cisco iOS.ios. I could have easily made it up I try not to do that. No, you just go onto the Ansible documentation and you find the module set matching the platform that you want, and it will be in the documentation. It tells you here are the supported network types. So we just fill that in. And then we get into modules. This is what actually does something in Ansible, okay? Modules are part of collections. I did not add collections here, but a collection is a group of modules. So for example, if I want to interact with Cisco iOS, then I would use the collection cisco.ios, and that provides me a great big list of modules that I can use. Module is a fancy word for a small Python script that does one thing and does one thing well. That's it. So you'll notice here's a access control list, interfaces, ACLs, BGP, protocol settings, iOS host name, interfaces. So each one of these is designed to do one thing because, remember, it uses idempotence. So that is created inside of that module. That's what handles that. We don't have to go into these, or, we don't have to go into the code for these to use them. When you click on this, you'll see the documentation, and it will tell you the parameter name config is a dictionary, and there's a required parameter called hostname, and that defines the hostname. So just follow the documentation, and that's going to guide your YAML creation. And you can see Cisco iOS hostname. That's the name of our module. So cisco.ios is the collection. iOS hostname is the module. And then all we have to do is supply the expected configuration of the parameters. So here, config. So we need to say config. Config should be a dictionary, and hostname needs to be in that dictionary, and it's a string. So hostname is part of the config dictionary, and there's that Jinja2 syntax there. So now I can run this against every device in my network, and it will just configure the hostname to what it is listed in the inventory. I don't have to write a separate play for each device. Tying this together, we get into playbooks. So let's start off. This up here, think of this as the playbook header. Kind of like a packet header, this is like our playbook header. We have a list of tasks. Remember when I showed you that JSON to YAML comparison? This is where we're going with that. A playbook is nothing but a list of tasks to execute. The tasks will be executed in the order defined. So caution, when you're beginning your network journey, you probably want to have something like your automation journey, you probably want to have something like a digital twin or a virtual device set up that you can run your playbook on. Because, for example, does anyone know what happens if you define an IP address for a device and then configure that interface for VRF forwarding? I see a couple of smiles out there. That's right. The IP address, it comes up and it tells you a message. Okay, IP address information has been reset for this interface. It's now in this VRF. So if I'm designing a play to make sure that an interface is in a VRF, I have to make sure I'm responsible for the order. Do the VRF first, then configure the address. So what's going to help you as you really get into Ansible and actually start using this is take what you do right now, and whether you already know it, you've been doing this for 20 years, or if you just want to write it down or make a list, you still need to execute those same steps. Network automation does not remove the requirement for you to actually define what to do. Okay? We tell it what hosts that we want to run on. In this case, host is all. We could say XE host, like that group that we defined, but in this case, I want this to run on every host. And we put this keyword tasks. That's our header. Anything under tasks, this is where our list begins of those tasks to run. And tasks use modules. So here we name each task. You can see we have a list. Again, the hyphens are a list. So we name the task. We tell it which module will actually be used for this task. And then we define the parameters required as listed in the documentation. Well, that is not right. This is where normally we would have the fun time of live demo. If your trusted speaker would have actually realized that he's running Apple Silicon now instead of an x86. So unfortunately, as much as I really wanted to show this actually happening in real time, I wanted to make sure that we covered the basic things. So what we talked about there, to recap, the basics of Ansible. YAML defined. Idempotence. Remember, doing the same action twice does not change the state. Only the first change takes effect. Modules are small Python scripts that execute one thing to perform some configuration on a device. Modules can be part of collections. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Modules can be part of collections, which is just a group of modules. We need to know the required parameters for a module. And then after we have that, we can tie it all together and create our playbook. Oh, don't forget, forgot the most important part, Jinja 2 syntax, double curly braces in quotation marks. And that's a variable substitution is all it is. Once we have all of that, we tie it together, we create our playbook, and then we run this with the Ansible playbook command. Think we have that? Yes, Ansible playbook. Once we have that, we just tell it the playbook that we want to run, and we're good. It will execute against all the targeted device from your inventory as defined. Now, that being said, by the way, if you have not signed up or if you're not logged in, we have plenty of free tutorials on Cisco U. If you go to u.cisco.com, then we have free tutorials. You do not have to pay for access to Cisco U. Go on there, just type Ansible, and you'll find a lot of content that we have to offer. Join that WebEx space, so we can continue the conversation. And I can supply you code. I've got code for this that's in a public repository, and then you can download that and run it yourself. Most importantly, and probably the reason that you're all here, besides the Kit Kats, one lucky person in the crowd is going to win a Cisco U Stanley Cup. No, it is not the hockey trophy. Unfortunately, that would be pretty cool if we did that away, although I might not let anyone have it. Someone has a penguin taped under your chair. So whoever has the penguin, we have a penguin. All right, winner. So see, you get to come, you get to stay for the lecture, and then get a prize. That's what it's all about. But I do want to thank all of you for coming. Please come and see me after this if you want to learn more about the opportunities we provide to learn more about Ansible or boot camps, or if you just want to talk about maybe some use cases or you have questions, more questions. I would love to hear your feedback. I hope you have an incredible week. Enjoy the rest of your time, and thank you very much for coming to Cisco Live.